Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us remotely is Ron Carson. He's the founder and CEO of the Carson Group. We're going to talk about the Fed and the massive resources that's putting into the U.S. financial system and how it will help. Ron, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you in what's certainly unprecedented times in the market. Let's walk through all of these resources that the Fed is putting into the system.
Yeah, well, Joe, thanks for having me. Coming to you from the middle of nowhere. We're out in Nebraska, so we're about 50 miles from the nearest next human. So really taking social distancing to the next level. But no, the Fed, Powell, I think he's done an amazing job. They learned a lot during the financial crisis, and the programs, continue to roll out. And I find it interesting that as a country and really as a world, we had to decide early on, who are we going to save, humans or save the markets? And I think even that pause a little bit put us a little bit behind the curve. But Powell and the Fed have come in and provided a lot of assurance. In some case, we talk about all the different programs. Just talking about the fact that they'll do whatever's needed, has really, they've become the financial plumber, right, to make sure things flow smoothly. And with the Paycheck Protection Program, that facility at $350 billion, that has been and going to be. There's a lot of frustration, obviously, around that right now because people have applied, they don't know where they're at, but the money's going to, very soon, start showing up in these business accounts. And I think the psyche of knowing the money is there and probably going to have more money continue to be allocated as needed has kept a lot of businesses they've kept people on. And I can only imagine what the numbers would look like, had we not had the Paycheck Protection Program facility in place. And then the Main Street Lending Program, $600 billion purchasing loans made to small and mid-sized businesses. That's, another layer that we did not have. The municipal facility, and people may or may not know, the Fed could always come in and purchase municipal debt as long as it had duration of 6 months or less. Well, they've extended that out to 2 years, so just dramatically improving liquidity in the municipal market. And then you've got this, $850 billion. Remember the TALF program, the Term Asset-Backed Securities Loan Facility, the Primary Market Corporate Credit Facility, the Secondary Market Corporate Credit Facility. And the fact that they're willing to come in and actually be a backstop, for high yield, also unprecedented. So I don't know if it's nearly enough. I don't think anybody does, at this point, but I think the Fed's actually really done a great job here in the short term of providing a backstop. If you would have described what was going to happen a year ago, and then you'd said the markets are going to do X, you would say there's no way. The markets would have to be down a lot more. So the markets are also in a wait and see, saying let's see how these programs actually play out.
Yeah, and I think that's what brings us to our next slide here. When we take a look at the economic data, yes, we know that we have a massive amount of support from the Fed and, of course, the Treasury. Even the private sector is doing what it can to make sure that we can support the people that it really impacts. But I think when you look at all this kind of data, as much money that's going into the system, really the risk there is duration, because as you point out here, the numbers aren't that good. Yes, they're lagging. Yes, we haven't seen these policies actually go into place yet. But I think we're going to look at economic data that is less than ideal over the next few months.
Yeah, and I think the data is going to be much worse than expected. It doesn't seem we can even get as pessimistic as we get. The numbers continue to come in even worse than expected. And obviously we know April is going to be horrific. And these numbers are not just down a little bit, they're setting all-time records. And even compared to the Great Depression, you look at retail sales below Great Recession levels, industrial production also down. Clothing down 50%, autos, furniture, sporting goods down 25%. Groceries, though, right? We're all sitting around gaining weight. I know we have, up 25%. And as we say, services more likely to get hit a lot more than manufacturing, and we're going to continue to see that. the big question around all of the data is we can look and we make some comparisons to the past, but the market's going to really have to start to figure out what's the new world look like, right? I don't think any of us expect we're going to go back and there's some V, although there's still people out there expect this year or the V. We don't, but we're trying to get our arms around what kind of gradual recovery could we have. And the one thing I would tell everybody listening to this comes from being in this profession for nearly 40 years, is be patient. The biggest risk out there, which isn't on our slide, is FOMO, the fear of missing out. I've seen it 1,000 times. Is people see a great company, they're selling a lot lower than they were, they come in and buy it. Just wonder how many people bought oil on Friday thinking it couldn't go any lower, and the futures as we speak are at under $6 a barrel. Just be patient and allow some of this to play out. Make sure your risk budgets are right, but don't allow FOMO, because FOMO will cost you a lot of money in this market.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you make. And if we take a look at your last slide here, where you identify the macro key risks, speaking of FOMO, I think the big concern is now we're starting to see some states, some factions within states take it in their own hands, and they're starting to integrate back into the environment, many without face masks, many without gloves. And I think that leads to your first point here. What if we get a pandemic resurgence? What if we get a wave 2? I think that could be even more scary than the initial wave that we had, because we understand this a bit better now.
Yeah, we believe it's a risk for 2 reasons. One, obviously, if there's a resurgence and we start to open up the economy too soon, then people, if we have this resurgence, they're going to be very worried next time we come around if there's an opening that, is it really safe to do so? And China's already seeing that, where their economy is being open, people are still staying at home, and they don't want to go out into large crowds. They don't want to take the risk. So that's part of us trying to figure out, what does new society, how do we interact with each other? Who are going to be the major winners and losers? But my fear right now is there's such social unrest. People are getting really fed up with, not having their freedom. And I just think that this gets reopened too soon as a really bad news for the equity markets. And because of the fact that how do we re-enter it again? And how do we get people to stay at home? And this thing, I'm afraid, could really take off. So I hope that we exercise more caution than I feel like we're going to right now, as you hear the headlines come across every day.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And to wrap up here, even when we look beyond getting back and hopefully if and when that there is a treatment and a vaccine, I just think the way that we will look as people and professionally will be very different. If you would have asked me in January, the beginning of this year, I need to be in a studio every single day for my job, that we'd be doing this remotely. It's amazing the technology that's available to allow people that are fortunate enough to have a remote work from home environment. I think that we'll continue to see that, or have that option more readily than we did before.
Absolutely. And we're already, even in our own business, we're finding better ways to do things, and things that we used to say, Jill, oh, we got to do it, or we got to be in person. We're like, we don't. And here's the other thing. There's going to be a massive shift with I'm going to call them more elderly people that have been a little less comfortable embracing technology. We're doing Zoom meetings. I mean, they're figuring that out pretty fast, going, this is pretty cool. So I think there's going to be a massive shift to the digital relationships. And so if your product or service is leaving people digitally dissatisfied, you better start working on it now, because that's going to be the new standard. And just compare yourself to their Amazon and their Netflix experience. All
right, Ron, thanks so much for joining us. It was great to talk.
Thank you, Jill. Have a great day.
And thank you for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.